needs Jesus? Oh yeah, you and me every second of every day. Who needs therapy? Oh yeah, me, you, all of us. And I love that today's incredible author, Tabitha Yates, she is an advocate for both. And I think when I hear people who are like mental health and Jesus, there can be some dichotomy where people are like, well, Jesus will heal you. And you're like, yes, he will. He can. Take every thought captive. Yes, you can. But anxiety, depression, these other elements of need are real. And I believe that when we have the wisdom and the connection of what it means to operate with this anointing, like Tabitha teaches us to, we need support. If we go to the gym, we go and get our body pumped and we have support, and we go to a doctor when we're sick, but we don't think about it from our mind. And so being able to do that and leaning into this conversation, I really think is going to help people. She has this awesome movement going on all around Jesus and therapy. She has a podcast herself, and this book is something you need in your hands. So if you are thinking, I'd have a message like that, I too have struggled with that, maybe your book is meant to be around something where Jesus and therapy is infused. Maybe it's not Jesus and therapy because that's her actual book. Go get it on Amazon right now. But knowing that we all have backstories in this realm, in this place, I would love to help you bring that story to life. So whether you're coming to one of our in-person events, our retreats, where we actually write your book, we get all of these ideas and cloudiness of how do I do this and where do I start and what does publishing look like out of the way, and we just start going in after the words that God has given you. Or if you need a personal coaching experience so that I can help you erect the story, bring it to life, have a formal outline for you to be able to execute and get your book to press, we want to be that company to support you. So fitandfaithmedia.com, go check it out. fitandfaithpress.com, same type of website, same intention. We're here to help you build the business ecosystem behind your movement. So I'm grateful you're here to tune in. Please, if you love the episode, not only shout out Tabitha, I want you to do that. Tabitha Yates, you rock. Also, leave us a review. Leave me a review. It would be such a gift. I appreciate you. I'm so grateful to hear about your individual movement. Let's go. Calling all his mighty messengers to the front lines, to the microphones, to the stages, to the bookshelves, to the digital platforms and beyond. This is Marketplace Ministry, and you are invited to join the movement as a messenger. I'm Tamra Andress, the one on the mic, but I honestly see it as a machete to cut through the lies, declare truth, transform narratives, and catalyze Christians like you and me to speak, write, build, and testify. I'd blow a trumpet right now if I could. This is a clarion call. It's not just time to rise, it's time to vocalize, unfiltered, uncompromising, unashamed, and undeniably bold. Together, we will turn your message into a movement, igniting global change, making disciples of nations, and touching the lives of billions by doing business God's way. This is not just another podcast to listen to and get stuck into a knowledge cycle with new information. It's an initiation into a transformative movement where isolated entrepreneurship is no more and the hustle and grind biz building is not welcome. We are operating from Sabbath rest and focused on sustenance, not success. Let's go, y'all. Welcome to the Messenger Movement. All right. You guys are in for a treat today. You are hanging out with me and Tabitha Yates, who is the author of the new book, Jesus and Therapy. It's about bridging the gap between faith and the mental health arena. Guys, this is brilliant. It's needed. If you haven't seen anything like it before, or you're only hearing about the self-help industry, Tabitha is coming to break the chains and the yoke of bondage that's been connected to it and introducing you to the one in which will carry the light load. Tabitha, I'm so grateful for the work that you did here and so grateful that we got to meet last year before this book came out. It feels like such a treat to have it in reality in my hands.
Yes, you were such a huge part of just giving me the needed confirmation I was needing in that point. I think it was the second round of edits I was coming through, and I was constantly seeking God, just, please be before me and show me that you're before me, show me that you're in this, because I don't want to do it if you're not. And so you really just stepped in when I needed a word from God, and I was so thankful for that.
I honestly don't remember what I said because that's literally how prophetic words work. You're just like literally being a conduit for Christ. But I remember
Mhm.
the emotion. I remember connecting. I remember holding you in the middle of all the people walking around. I remember the tears. And I
Yeah.
remember you telling me that was the exact words that I had asked God for the night before to say, I need confirmation. And so I'm saying that not to gloat, not to point at me, but to say that God knows and God has already
Mhm.
positioned your answer. But asking
Mhm.
God questions is so critical. And, putting the rug out there, throwing that fleece out there and saying, God, I've asked you time and time again, but I want you to do it one more time. Can you show me one more time? And so
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I got to be a part of that moment and to see this come to fruition because it is such a need. There's been such traction around this book. It's been already received awards. It's already in bookstores. And so this isn't your traditional like, hey, Tabitha did this yesterday by herself and ChatGPT helped her and she threw it up on Amazon. So Tabitha, let's
Mhm.
go through the process. Talk us through this journey, the revelation, and really the richness of what it is.
So this book was 5 years in the making. It really goes into my story of my history of, physical abuse, spiritual abuse, church abuse, mental health issues, depression, my suicide attempt, my psych ward stay, like so many things I didn't really want to talk about. And
Yep.
so God just dragged me kicking and screaming. Like I say it jokingly, but for real, that's why I asked him so many times, like Gideon, I'm like, rain here and here, but not right here. And like, I needed him to be so clear to me that he was going before me in this because it was terrifying. I was having opposition from people I loved most and, the greater world around me. And so I needed to know I was obeying God and then I was doing the right thing and then I was sharing my story with integrity because it does involve abuse in so many other people. And so it
Yes.
was so scary to step into. And God was so faithful. And when I say that I asked for confirmation from you, there was not one single time in the whole writing of this book, which was so long, that I didn't ask God for such a specific word and that it was less than 24 hours past and he'd give it. Like every time, it was never more than a day before he'd send a messenger and answer me back like right away, so that there was just no doubt in my mind. And I couldn't deny that I was doing what God called me to do. And he set this path before me. And it was what he wanted me to do, to tell this story, even though it was so vulnerable and so terrifying. And I was really just putting all my traumas out there for the world just to poke holes at. And nobody really wants to do that, but God was so faithful to show me he was in it and he was guiding me and that he would protect me. And that was the word you gave me, because I was just begging God, like, show me I'll be okay if I do this. And I put this out there and I step out into this world that is just so scary. And I just feel all the arrows coming. So show me you're in it and you're protecting me.
So rich. I process through like that one pain point that often messengers, writers, authors, podcasters, whomever who is feeling that nudge from the Lord, but they have these elements of fear, and it can often be correlated to other people, right? We have fear of man
Yeah.
and fear of judgment and fear of what will other people think of us and all of those
Mhm.
pieces.
Yeah.
What allowed you to like continue to push past that? And since releasing
Mm.
it, has the level of rejection you conjured up as a story actually come to fruition or any of those scenarios unfolded?
Um, some of the rejection did happen, and it was
Yeah.
from some very hard places.
Yeah.
Because obviously when you're going to dive into, trauma that involves so many other people, your silence benefits them. And so for
Totally.
my whole life being intimidated and scared to share my truth and not feeling like I was even allowed to share my story, that was the first thing God had to reveal to me in the first chapter I wrote, that you are allowed to shine a light on this. I've told you to. And I didn't feel free I didn't own my story. I didn't feel like I had a right to tell it. And so there was that rejection piece that definitely happened, which is why it was such a costly act of obedience, because I had to be like, I will do this even if I lose everyone, even if, I am just harassed by people, and no matter what the response to this is, I know the greater good that's being brought about by my obedience will be worth it. And that's, I feel like, what I have been seeing as it's just started. I mean, it's been out a month, but just as
Yeah.
it's starting to get the response that it's getting, is God had spoken to me right before the book came out. I turned 41, and he was really speaking to me about that biblical significance of that.
Mm.
And I got it tattooed on me, 41, just of that finally bringing God bring everything to fruition and answering my cries and everything that I sowed in tears, which I really did. He finally brought that to pass. And so it's just been amazing just to start getting a glimpse of what God's going to do with my yes and my obedience.
So good. I'm like obviously processing immediately. I'm like 41, 41. What's the significance? I'm thinking of like the post 40 years of exile, right? You're now in the land of the milk and the honey. You've passed over the Jordan. I'm thinking of like the 40 days of fasting that the Lord did and the 40 days of temptation. And then what happened when he went back that next day of the freedom that he had just literally fought with Satan and faced the enemy, and now is on this spiritual high because he spent time with the Father. And so that's awesome. It's rich. It actually gets me excited. I'm not yet 41, but I'm like, okay, let's go 40 and 41. I'm in for it.
Yeah, I was so depressed about 40, but I was actually like, I'm excited now to turn 41. I wasn't, but once God kind of gave me that word, I'm like, all right, I'm okay with it.
It's so good. It's so good. I love it. Okay, so let's talk about like the friction with faith, right? The friction with the church around mental health. I think it's bananas. Obviously, I am a huge mental health advocate myself, not to the same level of time invested that you are doing. And specifically, I haven't written a mental health book, but if you read any of my books, I talk about the value and the time frame and the years and the finances and the resources that went in to counseling, both maritally and individually. And I'm just such a proponent. Why do you think, and what would you say is the biggest pushback from the church when it comes to the mental health arena?
I think for some strange reason, we have separated physical health from mental health. Like it's not the same brokenness. And so we judge people and we have this double standard when they're taking care of their mental health and going to the doctor for their mental health, where we wouldn't think twice if they're going to the doctor for their physical health. So for some reason, there's this huge divide between the two when they're both just stewarding the body God gave us.
That's an easy like nail on the head, right? Like you guys process that for just a second. Who have you judged based on them going to see a mental health counselor or being on some sort of medication connected to their brain, the most important muscle in their being, versus those who have gone to the doctor to help their body? I just got diagnosed. I don't even like to say it out loud because I don't believe in diagnosis in that concept. But my body, my thyroid is struggling in some regards. I had like cortisol and adrenal issues and Hashimoto's. And I've never had physical ailments ever. And so this was like a new thing for me to step into. And honestly, Tabitha, I had more personal shame connected to that than I did going to go and sit with therapists and process through my mess and my trauma, because I had always been well, right? In that particular physical capacity. And I think mentally, it was more of like a generational thing. So like our generation is much more confident in talking about like, who's your therapist? What did she say? Have you asked your therapist? Versus our parents are like, oh, don't say that out loud. Why would you do that? So it also is a generational thing. And so when I say church, we're not just like pointing at, the church. We're pointing at people in the church who have created this stigma. Talk to us more about your own journey in that process and how you what were like the emotions and things that you worked through in order to be set free?
So I very much grew up in an old school, really hardcore evangelical church it was a sin. It was because there's something unconfessed. It was God's punishing you. You don't have enough faith. You're not praying enough. I mean, I've heard every single one. And so it was, and I was a kid, so I assumed they knew what they were talking about and that they were correct. And so I just took it and was like, okay, something's like really wrong with me. And I don't know, God's not taking it away. And I kept asking him and he wasn't. So I'm like, just pray harder and I'll just study the Bible more and meditate on it day and night. And like, eventually I'm going to get myself out of this. And when I look back now, understanding the depth of trauma I was just embroiled in, and I couldn't disentangle myself. I was stuck in it because I was a minor and I didn't have a choice. And the situations and the abuse I was being exposed to, I had no autonomy to step out of it and be like, no, like I don't want to know that person. I don't want to be in a relationship with that person. So I was just subjected to so many things I had no control over, and being made to believe at the same time, like so gaslighted, like all that trauma was my fault. And it rested on my faith or lack thereof. And that was what was the most damaging to my walk with the Lord, because I finally reached a place of brokenness. Like, I'm never going to be good enough. I'm never going to work through this enough for God to accept me and for me to be a good Christian and to be in good standing. So I'm just going to walk away from all of it because I can't do it, obviously.
Yeah.
So it just really drove me away from Christ big time. I left the church for several years. It was a really, I mean, I would say I've come to a pretty healthy place with the body of Christ and with, being an active churchgoer. But I feel like have been gifted to hold space for people that are not there and are so deep in their trauma still, they can't step back in, because that was the source of their trauma, was how they were treated, as if something they were doing was so wrong and so terrible, and not just brokenness. And again, things being done to them that is in no way their fault. And they had to carry that shame. Like, I guess I'm just the worst person ever because I can't get through this and God's not lifting it from me, And so it's just such a heavy weight done in God's name, which I feel like is just the most damaging part of it all.
Yeah, there's so much weight to that. And I know that there's people who are just like, yes, I feel this and she understands me. And so I'm prayerful that even as people are listening to this, that their chains are breaking one by one, and that there is no condemnation in Christ. And we are a holistic being, right? He's a triune God who cares about your mind, who cares about your body, who cares about your soul, who cares about your emotions. I think that's another lie that the enemy has used to distract us, especially as women, or suppress us, is like, you're so emotional, right? And it's like, yeah, but emotional intelligence is something we should be working on, right? It's how do you take every thought captive if you have no emotional awareness or emotional intelligence, and you're just a little bananas all the time. This is what a sound mind looks like. And it sometimes takes us to a place of therapy to teach, to train, to understand. We go to school and we spend money and time and all these resources to be in this place where we're learning about things that aren't actually eternal. And this is an eternal part of who we are. So when you came to this revelation and you're now in your experience with therapy, where was like the intersection of being like, oh my gosh, Jesus and therapy? Like, what did that look like?
It took me quieting my mind, first of all, to even hear anything God was saying. So it took me really taking a couple years just to sit with the trauma and start working through it. And then it took me separating Christ from Christianity, essentially, of taking, just starting to break down all of that church hurt and all of those lies and all of the shame. And I was like, did I really get taught anything that was accurate, an accurate representation of Jesus? Because I really didn't, And so having to just, I don't like to use the word deconstruct, because I came fully back to this faith. It was just stripping. I had to strip the foundation just back down to bare bones. Absolutely. Like, I don't know what I believe at all. And I had to build back and find the truth about who God was and how he loved me and what he said about me. And it took so long to remove all those labels that had been placed on me my entire life by church leaders and family members and people who are really pivotal. So those became my sense of self. Like, that's who I was. And it wasn't anything that God said about me and anything that his word said. So I had to work so hard and pair those two, of stripping away all of the lies, of digging into who God was and how he loved me, and truly his word and his heart and his character. But I couldn't absorb any of that until I dealt with some of the trauma. And one of my followers told me one time, like, it's really like, I can't hear anything. I can't hear God's voice. I can't process anything until the medication calms all the voices down. And then I can receive from God. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, there's a point where your mind is so broken. Like, I used to when I'd go to bed at night, I'd put my Bible under my pillow and I'd cry on it every night. Like, I could not open it. My mind was so it was like static all the time. I couldn't think any thoughts. I couldn't receive anything from God. I couldn't believe. But there's this core level of me that knew I'd come back to it and knew he was real, even though I was denying it. And that's all I could do, is just cry and hold his word close. And that's as close as I could get to it, because my mind was filled with so much brokenness and confusion. That's as far as I would step into it at that point.
Wow. And just knowing that, like, as much as we chase him down, like, he's chasing us down in those moments and being like, I'll just sit with you, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to catch every tear. We're going to use it to sow good seed into the souls of other people eventually, which is exactly what you're doing. None of those tears are counted, not counted. They're all counted as worthy and not
Mhm.
worthless. So in the back of every chapter, you guys, which you have to get your hands on this book, like now, run to any store that you could think of online as well and get your book, Jesus in Therapy. But in the back of every chapter, she does this like breakdown of the chapter, and she does this what Jesus would say, and this is what therapists would say. And I love this piece because it really is this beautiful mold, this beautiful blend. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of pieces in mental health arena or therapy that can lean so hard into science or into theory that
Right.
they're missing the word of God. And so I'm an advocate for Christian therapy. I think that there's a lot when someone can take that and literally, like you said, put the Bible underneath everything that they're teaching me. I want the truth, right? That's
Yeah.
not always accessible to everyone. And so we can do that beautiful work because the Lord will present it to us if we're in that posture.
Mhm.
But walk us through like when you started to get into the word again, when you started to find that healing and clarity in mind. What was that journey like, and how are you advocating for others to do the same through the book?
Um, I think I went through I wanna say it was well into my 20s before, faith started making sense to me again, and I started really combining the 2 after I had kids, because I just so clearly saw, like, this is not what I wanna pass on. This is not, just that breaking of the generational curses. Like, I'm not going to give these issues to my kids. So I will do whatever I have to do. I will sit with whatever pain. I will come toe to toe with whatever demon to make sure that they don't have to recover from their
Mhm.
childhood like I had to. And so I spent a lot of my 30s, I want to say, just really leaning so hard into both
Mhm.
of doing really intensive therapy work like EMDR. Like, I'd drive around for hours after a session because I just could not come down from how hard and painful it was.
Mm.
But at the same time, there were a million broken, sobbing on the floor moments with Jesus where he was all that I had. And he was just embracing me, and he was so present in the pain. And it's amazing how I can see that looking back. All of my teenage years and through all of the abuse and trauma, I was convinced God was not there and that he had left me and he wasn't there. And even seeing his hand of mercy, in hindsight, looking back at those moments, I know he was always there. But now it's just such a tangible
Mm.
presence and peace that I didn't have because I that peace was also something that I had to work on by digging up all these deeply rooted lies and all this shame and all these painful experiences. And so I say that they work together because I'm like, I don't think I would feel the physical peace I feel now if I still had all that festering inside of me because it
Yes.
was just buried beneath the surface. I had to have Jesus actively sowing his word and his truth into me at the same time, uprooting all the
Yes.
stuff that
Yes.
I believed that was not really from him and was not his truth. And so much of what I advocate for now is don't divorce these two things. Like, if you broke your leg and you really needed healing, absolutely. Would you lean into God in that pain? Sure. Would you not go to physical therapy? No, you probably would,
Right.
like
Right.
you've got to do some of the work. And
Yes.
so unfortunately, trauma that happened to us might not have been, likely was not our fault, but the healing is now our responsibility. So
Good.
taking that on and being like, I can do something about it now. I couldn't then. And that sense of empowerment, I feel like came from Jesus for me. Like, it wasn't your fault. The people that hurt you, the people that abused you in my name, the people that beat you, the people that told you should kill yourself, none of that was your fault. But now all that pain is there. All those scars are there. So let's start working on it so that
Yeah.
you can be different for your kids and so that you can be whole and experience the fullness of life I do want you to have. And so trying to teach people that it's gonna take both. When you've
Yeah.
lived a life like mine and experienced that level of trauma, like, you're gonna have to do some work.
Yes.
God
Yes.
doesn't just necessarily rain it down from heaven. He's with you in it, and you will feel him with you in it. But it is also gonna be a hard work and a holy work to heal.
I have been thinking about so many things as you're talking, my own personal story and the uncovering of the sexual trauma that had been so suppressed in my life. I didn't even have any recollection of it until I was 29.
Wow.
That's crazy. That's like deep rooted trauma. And so what it makes me believe and understand for people is like, there are also people who are walking around kind of in this like um, mediocre zone, like comfortable zone. And they're just like, oh, I've been a Christian my whole life. And, I've never really had any problems. And life is, and when I meet those people, I'm like, I love you. And I pray that that is deep spiritual truth and not just an unconscious, subconscious, like suppression mechanism so that you're not facing, because that's really what kind of life I was leading.
Yeah.
Everything was masked. Everything was good. I was always happy, barely fought with my husband, like counted on one hand. We'd been together and had kids. Like healthy communication requires some agitation. Okay. And so it's okay. But I am also thinking through all of the messengers, all the authors that are coming in there. Like, I want to take my message. I want to turn it into a movement. I want to serve people. Mass majority of the business consulting that I'll do behind the book work is therapy. It 100% is therapy. Based on some of the things that you're sharing here, is just like, there's fear connected to releasing this. There's, that concept, like you said, rejection, and it's not a false fear. It's like, this is actually going to happen. How am I going to handle this? And so really coming toe to toe with some of that. And then that beautiful thing that you said at the end is just like the constant process of uprooting and sowing happens simultaneously, because the Lord doesn't want you to be void just because you've had these revelations and you're pulling weeds out, right? Even in a garden, when you uproot something, you're going to re-soil something. You're going to get it prepared for what's coming next. It's never going to be totally vacant. And that is a beautiful part of what the Lord can do. And why I think the prayer, the petition, the fasting, the worship is a place that even if you come with nothing, right? There's that song that says like, I've got nothing to give you, so make me your offering. Like just showing up is enough for Jesus.
Yeah.
Just showing up. So I'm prayerful as people are listening, like they realize that there's more behind this conversation than even what we're saying. And the book is going to go into those details. When you talk about suicidal ideation, and that's another part in church where people are like, you can't be suicidal. You can't have these thoughts. Why would you say something like that? And that is reality of what we're walking through. We're in a very, it's no darker than it was in the Old Testament, but it's a relative, and people are just becoming aware based on what feels like a new suppression tactic left and right? Whether it's governmental, political, educational, social, economic, whatever that is. So talk us through, like, for somebody who's potentially processing, where do I go? What should I do? What would that advice look like? And you can pull straight from the book, obviously, at this point.
This first people with suicidal ideation, or just like thinking
or
about
just in general. Like, I think suicidal ideation is sometimes a starting point, but you talk in the book, you share some like signs of like that you might need support, that you could use help. What are some of those other pieces?
I think there's, and I do in the book, that was really important to me. I was like, I want to have a bunch of checklists. I want to have a bunch of resources in there. Like, don't limit this. And they didn't, so that was really one of the things that I wanted to, I start off the book, the very first chapter of signs of spiritual abuse, because I did not know that I was going through that at the time. Obviously, again, I was a teenager, so I guess I wouldn't have. But now looking back, I can be like, oh, these are kind of all the things that now I'll get those red flags with leaders and be like, that's not really healthy. Yeah. And so going from that and then going through depression and anxiety and suicide and being like, this is kind of some of the things to look for. There's obviously some stereotypical things, but there's also things that maybe don't jump out at us right away that is just a sign of something deeper going on. And I think, like you said, there's a lot of repressed trauma. Like, I don't remember a lot from like 12 all the way back to my childhood. Most of my childhood I blocked out because that was my only way to cope with what happened to me. And it's hard to dig it up. It's so hard. And so what I really wanted to do was give some people some pointers of these are some emotions you might be feeling. These are some things you might be struggling with if you do need help. I, for one, am a proponent of counseling will benefit anyone. Like,
Yes.
I don't think you can go wrong there. If once you find the right person, I feel like just from communication patterns to, self beliefs, like there's so many things that I think it would help no matter what. But really, the people that need to go, that are suffering from brokenness and suffering from trauma, I wanted them to see what it looked like in real life, what it looked like in my life, what I was experiencing when I was suppressing it. Like, I will still have the most massive panic attacks. You talked earlier about the fear of coming out with this. The night I turned in my final edits, I had about an hour and a half long panic attack, and I
Oh,
just shook violently and sobbed till I had nothing left, because the inner childhood me was just screaming that
right.
I wasn't safe anymore. Like, it's out there. They're going to be so mad at you. Like, why would you do this? And I couldn't get that screaming out of my head because I was so terrified that
Mm.
I couldn't hide anymore. And that's been so much of the process of God just stripping away all of my fear through this. I mean, the radio show I had last week, that was my first time on the radio. I think I had a 3-day long panic attack about doing that. I was so terrified. I'm like, why am I doing this? And I'm like taking an Ativan before I
Yeah.
go on and talking about anxiety. And I'm sitting there like freaking out. And it's so much of what I still go through and what I'm
Right.
still facing. And so I feel like so much of this book, I wanted to feel like a journey. Like, I'm not telling you, like, I am walking it with you.
Yes.
I am
Yes.
bringing you into my process. I'm telling you what it looks like when you feel anxious, when you have depression, when you have deep rooted, complex trauma, when you have PTSD. Like, I have all of it. So I'm like, I'm not talking from a place of, I'm like in the trenches. Here I am. Let's see how we can address this and how we can approach it, both from a faith perspective of how can God step into the situation, and from how do I take this into therapy? Because if you could read the book and it could benefit you in so many ways. But if you are really like an abuse survivor, a complex trauma, or suicide, they were very pointed with me. Let's put in those trigger warnings. Let's make sure that people know, like, walk through this with support, take it to your counselor, talk about it. And that's why I give those steps at the end of every chapter. Go talk to your therapist about this. And this is some leading questions. And these are some things you can ask to start those conversations and start healing.
It's so powerful. The advocating piece of being in the middle, right? And I think that's where a lot of people are like, people seem so far removed from
Mm-hmm.
things sometimes that they become the advocate, but they forget because things are different and they're constantly shifting, like I said, in society at large.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that you're in the middle with people. That's where the best leaders are, I think, because you can actually say, I get you. I understand. Let's talk about that. And it's not this oblong idea, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
actually something tangible to you. So
Yeah.
when you're in the middle of it, you've got Jesus in therapy. What's the forecast of inviting people into relationship with you beyond just the book? Are you doing retreats? Are you doing conferences? Like, what are you imagining this is going to
I am going to be at the AACC, the Christian Counselor Conference, in September. I'm going to be doing
Awesome.
a book signing there, and they're putting me in the Christian Counseling Today magazine to
Let's
kind of
go.
advertise that. I've got a lot of different radio shows and podcasts coming up. I'm most active on Facebook. I kind of hate Instagram. I'm trying not to, but like all the
I
hashtags,
love
I'm like, I have 3 kids. I don't have time for this.
I
So
love
I'm most
her Facebook is great, guys. She's got like 43,000 followers over there. So the Redeemed Mama, make sure you head over
Mhm.
there. Also, I loved the redeemedmama.com has a beautiful explanatory of all of the book and the awards that it's won and the reviews that it's getting. It really is taking off in so many different ways. And so I encourage you to go check those places out and follow along on the mission, because I know those will not be your only, in-person experiences. There's so much more to come with this, and it's such a needed conversation. I want to see people say yes to this and to stand up boldly, especially within the conversations connected to church.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what our biggest heart is. I'm just giving it like candy to pastors for
Yeah.
free, because I'm like, I just want it in the church. I want it to be a resource. That's
Amen.
the areas where it's taken off the most, with Christian counseling and religious counseling, pastoral counseling. So I'm like, I just want to get it in their hands so they know this can help you walk people through it. And this can just be a bunch of information and a treasure chest of, tools that you can use with other people as well.
So good. I love that from the pastoral care perspective, because
Mhm.
we see the burnout, we see what transpires, we see the traumas that are actually taking place. That spiritual manipulation is literally taking place, even from the top down, even pastors thinking like there's more coming from the top to that pastor than what you might recognize.
Right.
Even if you view them at the top, there's a lot more. And so I value that piece for the messengers, for the people who are coming in, because you're not the only person, and the people that you think have it all together are sometimes the people who have it worse off.
Right.
And so there's a lot of just, again, like taking away the shame to this conversation and making it more commonplace. I could see this as a phenomenal devotional book that churches walk through studies and go through that together. So the curriculum is like already in here, you guys. So it's not just like read Tabitha's story about Jesus in therapy. It is so practical. It's so connective, and it is truly a tool. Literally, like you said, take it into your therapist and turn to the back and say, hey, this is what I just walked through, and this is the question I have for you, because they're all right there. So I'm excited to tab it and even just walk through it again. That's the beautiful thing about therapy and Jesus, is just like you would read the Bible again and the scripture illuminates differently. This is something in a new season you're going to have to ask yourself maybe the same exact question, because there's a new answer. So I'm grateful for the time that you spent in tears, because I know it's going to heal so many through the power of Jesus. Thank you for coming on the show. Do you have any final messages you want to send people anywhere specifically before we jump off?
Just that I'm so thankful that God brought our paths together, and that God has been so faithful, and just to hold on when things are hard, when you don't see the light, when you don't see the end of the tunnel. There's always hope and healing that's possible, and it's available. And I know that the biggest lie of depression is it'll never get better. You'll never get past this. And that's so much of my story is, now I have anxiety, but like I have worked through so much of the depression. I've worked through so much of the trauma, and it just keeps getting better because God keeps on being faithful to redeem it. And that's the biggest thing, that in Jesus, absolutely nothing is wasted. It wasn't your fault what happened to you, but God is not going to allow that to be a void in your life. He's going to take it, he's going to turn it into purpose, and he's going to do something so beautiful in your life that in the darkness you can't even imagine, but it's there, and that light and that hope is available.
Amen. Amen. We pray that this just continues to create a movement for you in your own life, and advocate alongside Tabitha and me. Jesus and therapy, they go hand in hand. I appreciate you for being here, and I can't wait to see what happens next with your book and all of the traction. You're welcome. Love you. All right, y'all, go get the book.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Messenger Movement podcast. As you know, it is an utmost honor of mine to be able to come and do this work, to be able to edify and encourage and equip the church, which is you. You are the messenger that I am hoping will turn their message into a movement and ultimately evangelize and spread the good news in whatever way God has fashioned you to do so. If you need help with that, I'd love to do that as well, through podcasting, publishing, and platform development, developing your business from the inside out. And there are so many different ways that we could work together. So be sure to send us an email at hello@tamraandress.com, or you can tap any of the links below the show. There's so many show notes, so many ways of engagement, and I can't wait to get to know you more. Thank you as well for just sharing this episode if it blessed you. And of course, leaving a review means the world. So you're amazing. And just know that you have wind at your back in everything that we're doing here at Fit and Faith Media and the Founder Collective. Love you.